In what other field does a person with no college degree, no training, no background, no formal experience, and no connections massively outperform someone with the best education, the best training, and the most elite connections? It is impossible in medicine. A janitor cannot perform open-heart surgery better than a Harvard-trained surgeon. It is impossible in engineering. A gas station attendant cannot design a skyscraper better than a structural architect. It is impossible in elite sports. And yet, in the world of money, this happens all the time. Let that sink in for a moment. Financial investing is the only field in the entire human experience where a complete amateur can outperform a dedicated expert. This fact is not just a statistical anomaly. It is the fundamental crack in the foundation of how we are taught to think about wealth. We are raised to believe that money is a hard science. We are taught that it behaves like physics, that there are laws, formulas, and distinct rules that, if followed, yield predictable results. We believe that finance is math-based. We believe that data, spreadsheets, and high IQ strategies are the prerequisites for accumulation. But this is the mistake everyone makes. This is the lie that keeps smart people broke and keeps the anxious awake at night. The truth is that money is not a hard science. It is not physics. It is not math. Money is a soft skill. It is a game of psychology where how you behave matters significantly more than what you know. Today, we are going to dissect the introduction of Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money to understand why the smartest people in the room often end up in financial ruin, and why the quiet, unassuming observers often walk away with the fortune. To understand this phenomenon, we must look at the story of Ronald Read. If you haven't heard of him, that is by design. Ronald Read was a rural Vermont native. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school, a feat that was impressive in his context, but hardly headline news. For 25 years, Ronald repaired cars at a gas station. For 17 years, he swept floors as a janitor at JCPenney. He lived in a tiny house he bought for $12,000 at age 38. He was a widower who chopped his own firewood well into his old age. He was, by every observable metric, an ordinary, blue-collar man living a quiet, low-income life. When he died in 2014 at the age of 92, the humble nature of his existence suggested he might have left behind a few $1,000s, perhaps enough to cover his burial. But when the executors of his estate opened the books, they found something that made international headlines. In 2014, 2,813,503 Americans died. Fewer than 4,000 of them had a net worth of over $8 million. Ronald Read was one of them. He left $2 million to his stepkids and donated $6 million to his local library and hospital. How? Was he a lottery winner? No. Did he inherit a trust fund? No. Ronald Read simply saved what little he could and bought blue chip stocks. Then he waited. He waited for decades. He let the tiny, imperceptible force of compounding interest work its magic while he swept floors. That was it. No secret formula, no high-frequency trading algorithm, just patience and behavior. Now, let's look at the other side of the coin. A man who theoretically should have been thousands of times more successful than Ronald Read. His name was Richard Fuscone. Richard was everything Ronald was not. Richard was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA. He had a successful career in high finance, so successful that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. He was included in Crain's Business Magazine's 40 Under 40 list of successful business people. He was the definition of smart money. He had the education, the pedigree, the connections, and the raw intelligence. But Richard Fuscone had a fatal flaw. He was greedy. In the mid-2000s, Fuscone borrowed heavily to expand an 18,000-square-foot home in Greenwich, Connecticut that had 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, and 7 garages. The maintenance on this property alone cost $90,000 a month. Richard believed, as many high IQ people do, that his past success predicted his future stability. He believed the complex financial models that said he was safe. But when the 2008 financial crisis hit, the math didn't matter. The liquidity dried up. The leverage turned against him. In 2008, Richard Fuscone filed for bankruptcy. The 18,000 square foot mansion was foreclosed on. It was sold for pennies on the dollar. The Harvard genius was ruined. This is the core lesson that breaks the brains of engineers and doctors. The outcome of these two lives was not determined by intelligence. Richard Fuscone was objectively smarter than Ronald Read in terms of financial literacy. He knew how to read a balance sheet. Ronald probably didn't. He knew about derivatives and yield curves. Ronald just knew not to spend money he didn't have. If money were truly a science, Fuscone would have won, and Read would have been a footnote. But money is not a science. It is a reflection of human behavior. Ronald Read succeeded not because he was a financial wizard, but because he mastered the soft skills: patience, humility, and delayed gratification. Richard Fuscone failed not because he lacked data, but because he lacked the behavioral discipline to manage risk and suppress his own ego. He fell victim to the psychological trap that says, "I am smart, therefore I am invincible." This brings us to the profound realization about our own relationship with wealth. We spend thousands of hours learning how to earn money, acquiring technical skills, degrees, and certifications. But we spend almost 0 hours learning how to behave around money. Look around you. We are living in an era of unprecedented access to information. You have more financial data on your smartphone than the President of the United States had 30 years ago. You have instant access to global markets. You have AI tools that can analyze stocks in seconds. And yet, are people better with money? No. In fact, many are worse. Why? Because the modern environment amplifies the Richard Fuscone within us. It encourages speed. It encourages leverage. It encourages the belief that because we have smart tools, we don't need boring behaviors. We see people chasing 1,000% returns on meme coins because they feel they are behind. We see high-income tech workers earning $300,000 a year, living paycheck to paycheck, because lifestyle creep has consumed their psychology. Just like Fuscone, they are smart, but they are behaviorally insolvent. They are trying to solve a psychological problem with a mathematical solution. They think, if I just make more money or find the perfect stock pick, I'll be safe. But without the behavioral foundation of Ronald Read, more money just means more liability. It just means a harder crash. The deepest dive here is understanding that finance is actually a study of history and biology, not engineering. In engineering, we solve problems. We build a bridge, and if the physics are right, the bridge stands. But in finance, the bridge has to stand while the ground underneath it, the market, is violently shaking, and while the person walking across it, you, is having a panic attack. The smart thing to do in 2008 was to hold your positions because history shows markets recover. That is the mathematical answer. But the psychological reality is that when you see your life savings vanish in a week, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, hijacks your logic. Richard Fuscone didn't fail because he didn't know the market would eventually recover. He failed because he structured his life in a way that he couldn't survive the downtime. He had no margin for error. Ronald Read, on the other hand, had nothing but margin. His low cost of living was his superpower. He didn't need the market to be perfect to survive. He just needed it to exist. So, what is the perspective shift? How do we apply this? It requires a complete dismantling of your ego. You have to stop viewing money as a test of your intelligence and start viewing it as a test of your character. You have to realize that you don't need to be a genius to get rich. You just need to not be a fool. And being a fool is very easy, even for a genius. The goal of financial freedom is not to have the highest returns. It is to have the most options. It is to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. That is the highest dividend money pays. Ronald Read had that freedom long before he had $8 million. He had it because he didn't need to impress anyone. Richard Fisehone was a prisoner of his own success, shackled by the need to maintain an image that eventually bankrupted him.
The mistake everyone makes is thinking that financial success is about outsmarting the market. It's not. It's about outlasting your own bad behavior. As Morgan Housel puts it, doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. So stop trying to be a genius. Start trying to be a survivor. Because in the game of money, the survivor takes it all.